What's up? Hey, hello, everyone. Wow. So, we hope you all had a safe, relaxing, healthy Thanksgiving yesterday if you celebrate. But today, we are going to be talking about Survivor Season 41, Episode 10. Last week, we were speculating, Shan and DeShawn are going to have to fight it out soon, not expecting it was going to be Ricard versus Shan and this early. So it was such a fun episode. So my name is Rachel.
I'm Alyssa, and I found this a really interesting episode because we got to see a lot about the players, we got to see a lot about their relationships with each other, and it was just, I had a great time because there was great strategy, there was great interpersonal play, like everything that you could want in a Survivor episode, I feel like we got.
I agree. So we start off this episode seeing DeShawn. I keep doing that. Oh my gosh, that is their ship name, DeShawn. But we saw DeShawn and Shan having a chat. It was a really interesting conversation. They were saying basically conflicted about how do we balance doing it for our culture, the Black culture, or do they do it and try to get to a four together for their own personal game, because $1 million, that is a lot of money. DeShawn talks about how he has student debt, and then Shan brings up her experiences with being homeless and housing security. So it was really interesting that they kept that conversation in there. So how do you balance doing it for their culture versus doing it for themselves, life-changing amount of money that they can bring back to themselves and their family?
Yeah, I thought it was really interesting too because since Survivor has created a new diversity initiative, there was this season a lot of Black players, so they could create this alliance. And so I feel like part of the pressure they feel might have been because this was one of the first times in Survivor history where they could do it for the culture, as they said. So I thought this was a really great humanizing moment for both Shan and DeShawn. Like, you saw them as strategists, but you also really saw them as like people, and people who were conflicted over something. And I feel like it's good that we got to see this internal conflict because I feel like starting out the episode this way really set the stage for the rest of what they were going to do.
I agree, especially with the diversity initiatives for CBS with the 50%. We saw similar conversations and this internal struggle in the most recent season of Big Brother, where they also had a Black player alliance called the Cookout Alliance. And in that show, with the live feeds, we also saw those contestants have this similar struggle of, oh, do we want to do this for creating and having the first Black winner of Big Brother in the United States, because that has never been done before. It would be such a huge thing and a momentous moment for them and their culture versus $750,000 that you win for winning Big Brother is also a life-changing amount of money. So we saw a similar struggle for those people on Big Brother in the most recent season. So it is really cool that we're getting more representation on these reality TV shows that we love, and that these conversations are being aired.
Yeah, just because, like we said, it's a life-changing thing for anyone, but I think it's especially life-changing, like what Shan said, with everything that happened in the Black community in 2020. So yeah.
Definitely. And we saw so many players like JD talking about growing up with Survivor, having role models from their community on the show. And so it's cool to see when someone looks like you on TV, and especially cool when it's on a show that you love, like Survivor or Big Brother. So it's such a cool thing with the diversity initiative that so many different people can see themselves in the players on TV.
Mm-hmm.
So we go into the reward challenge for this episode. It is a rope obstacle challenge where you have to solve a puzzle and then you win a pizza and a sleepover party. Personally, for me, I felt like for what an awesome episode this was, that the two challenges that they had this episode were so meh. Like, they weren't that memorable or exciting. On the second watch, I fast forwarded like 2 times speed through it. They're not memorable, these challenges.
I feel like part of it was kind of the editing of the challenges. Like there wasn't a lot of like big dramatic music or anything. It felt like a lot of just Jeff's voice. I always find it really funny when Jeff in these challenges is like, you really gotta concentrate. Don't think about anything other than yourself. And it's like, Jeff, you're over here screaming in their ears. Like, come on, dude. So
Yeah. Besides that, Ricard wins this first reward challenge, and he had a choice to make of picking people to go on the pizza trip and the sleepover with him. When he had that first choice, I literally said out loud, oh, he has to pick Shan. If he doesn't, that is just so bad because Shan, like we've seen, she has not been on a reward yet. She hasn't had that food reward. And Shan and Ricard are closely aligned. You have to pick her, even though for these reward challenges, some may say, okay, for strategy, you wouldn't necessarily want to pick your closest alliance member because people will be like, oh, Ricard and Shan are super close. We need to vote one of them out because they're picking each other for reward. But everyone already knows they're close because they were the last two people out of their tribe. So I felt like Ricard had to pick Shan first, and that was a really, really good decision.
I feel like if he hadn't picked Shan first, she would have raised some hell with him. Just because, especially because one of the main arguments that we've seen between them was because he had gone on reward and she hadn't, with the whole Papaya Gate thing. Like, I feel like he had to pick her. So, yeah.
And even
I think
Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, I think there was no way that it would have been a bad thing for Ricard to pick Shan, just because at the end of the day, like if their alliance members were gunning for them, it was going to happen either way. Like I don't think that Shan ended up going home tonight because Ricard picked her to go on the alliance or go on the reward.
Yeah, definitely some other factors which we'll talk about later in the episode. I agree. I think with this first pick, and even for anyone else who won this pizza reward, they won this challenge, you would probably pick Shan and Heather first, and you could easily explain it away saying, oh, these two people haven't won anything yet. I'm doing it out of the goodness of my heart to give them a reward, versus all of you else that you had the merge feast, you had the cheese, the what are they, grilled cheese feast. So yeah, you had the grilled cheese feast, so it's like you all had food, but Shan and Heather, you haven't had food yet. Heather as the second pick, I also think makes a lot of sense. He can easily explain that reasoning, so people can't really be mad at you for picking the two people that haven't ate anything yet.
Yeah, I feel like the only thing that he could get in sticky situations with was the third person that he chose, but even then, I feel like you can't be too mad at him for picking Erica. So
Or Xander, right?
Xander, sorry. Whew. I was thinking about Erica next because she was the one who started doing some sneaky things while they were away. So yeah.
I agree though. Xander as the third pick, also a good way of explaining, saying that Xander stepped out of that immunity challenge to give rice for the team, where Shan, Ricard, Nasir, and Xander were the four people to negotiate and drop out of that immunity challenge to get the tribe rice. So like you can't be too mad at that, right? It's like no one else stepped forward to give up immunity, so Xander can get rewarded for that. So I think Ricard's three picks of Shan, Heather, and Xander makes a lot of sense, and people can't be like super holding a grudge over him for those picks.
Exactly. So I feel like it also was good because Xander, I feel like, is someone that Ricard wants or needs on his side. So I feel like picking Shan was the obvious choice, and then Heather and Xander are kind of on the quote unquote other team. So Ricard can keep building the relationship he built with Heather last episode, and he can maybe feel out where Xander is.
Yeah, Heather and Xander are more like free agent people, so you can schmooze them at the pizza reward, get them on your good side, and maybe Erica would be pissed off that she was left back at camp, but you can't really pick everyone, so even if she is a little bit mad, like she can't be too mad because of the reasoning Ricard gave, and leaving Danny, DeShawn, Liana, and Erica back at camp. Ricard thinks he's aligned with Danny, DeShawn, Liana, and Shan, so maybe he's thinking, okay, I can leave those three, Danny, DeShawn, Liana, with Erica back at camp because nothing can really happen because they all are against Erica. They wanted to vote Erica out recently, and I'm aligned with Danny, DeShawn, and Liana, so I can leave them back at camp, and nothing too detrimental will happen.
But yeah, I agree with the reasoning that he had. It just ended up not being what ended up happening. And I feel like in Survivor, you can never read someone else's mind. So
yeah, we go to the pizza reward. I think, is this the same hut island that Brad, Sydney, and Tiffany went to when they did their overnight trip? It looked
it
sort
looks
of like
it did.
Yeah, so I was sad though. We barely got to see any of the pizza or the sleepover part. Like, I wanted to see what the pizza looked like and what their bed looked like.
I also thought it was interesting because like they made a big deal about how it was a Survivor resort, and it's like that's not really a resort there, but okay.
That's why they cut out showing the bed.
Yeah, but
yeah, I thought they had a really interesting conversation at this pizza reward. We see Shan and Ricard talking about needing to take one another out eventually. So I was like, dang, have we seen these conversations like this aired before? It was so fascinating to see these two people have been together since day one. They've been working together, even though they've had their ups and downs. They both mutually realize that they can't go to the end together. I feel like usually duos, they would just go to the end together because they have such a strong bond. They don't mind losing to the other person because it's like, oh, if I can't win, I love you, I want you to win kind of thing. Or they like take each other out too early, or like they lie and they say, hey, I'm your final two, when they're lying and they're not actually a final two, and then brutally blindside the other person, that the other person really has a grudge against them after the fact. But it's like here, they both acknowledge the need to take each other out. It's just so fascinating, their relationship.
yeah, it's fascinating because they both acknowledge that they need to take each other out, but it almost seems like Shan is reluctant to take Ricard out. Because even though she knows that it has to happen eventually, she keeps saying to him, like, oh, not yet, not yet. Like, I don't want to take you out yet. And I think it's so interesting. Like, if Shan hadn't gone home tonight, like, what would have ended up happening, you know? Because would she have kept on being like, oh, not yet, not yet? Like, I want to wait longer. So
Yeah, not yet, not yet, until we're in the final three together. So that would have been
exactly.
interesting. I also thought it was interesting with the Shan Ricard conversation where Shan says, oh, I think a man will beat a woman in the end, like no matter what. I thought that was interesting because we saw Evie say something similar in the pre-merge when Evie said, oh, I don't want to go to the final three with Voce and Xander because those two guys would get all of the credit. And then Ricard says, oh, I don't know, I think this season might be different though. So it's sort of like these players this season, they know the game, but they're also like metagaming the game where they're like, oh, I can't go, if I'm a woman, I can't go up against the man at the end because the man gets credit, the man will win. Versus on the other hand, Ricard is like, no, 2021, with everything that's happened recently, maybe the woman will beat the man this season. So I feel like they're metagaming too much.
I think it's interesting though, because a lot of times, I guess not a lot of times, but previously there had been comments where someone was like, oh, a woman is definitely going to win this season. And people were like, oh, ethically, that means a woman wins. But that's like not what happened. Like on Island of the Idols, Sandra was like, oh, I bet a woman is going to win. And Rob was like, yeah, definitely. But then it didn't happen. So I wonder if this is kind of preparing for the same thing, where Ricard's like, oh no, a woman can beat a man at a final three or a final two, and it ends up being that's not the case. So that's just a thought I had.
Yeah, there's more men than women in the game now. at the merge, we were talking the women outnumber the men, 2 more women than there were men. But now there is, 7 people left, 4 men, 3 women in the game. So it could be another male winner. It'll be interesting for the end few weeks here.
Yeah, I think I've seen a lot of speculation just because a lot of the women left in the game seem like they're non-entities to win. And so I feel like a lot of people have said that they'd be upset if there was a female winner just because none of the women still left in the game have been edited in a way where it would be like a triumphant win for them. So.
Oh my gosh, have you been on Reddit like I guess yesterday and today? Everyone is posting about Erica. Like every single post is Erica's the winner. I think Erica's the winner now. It's so interesting to see like the subreddit flip 180 on Erica after this one episode.
I thought it was interesting too because we have this continued narrative of like, oh, Erica is a threat, which like I still don't really get. Because when Shan and Liana are talking to each other, the people that Liana names as like who's playing the game, her first answer is DeShawn and her second is Erica. And it's like, to us who have like been watching the season, that doesn't make sense. But to them, it seems like Erica has consistently been named as a threat. So that's just an interesting, I guess, why people have kind of been confused about Erica, because we've been told that she's a threat, but haven't really, seen it. So,
which I think we sort of see that inkling this episode, which we'll talk about when we get to the split vote. But like coming up with that plan to split the votes that technically could save her if Shan did play the idol. I think that's sort of giving us an inkling to like, dang, Erica is thinking, she's creating this split vote. She's not just the lamb that she says she doesn't want to be, but she's actually like making this move or trying to make a move, which is interesting because I do think Erica gets a lot of the credit this episode for making this move happen after Ricard, which we'll get to at the end of this podcast.
Yeah, I was going to say it's really interesting, like, who gets credit in moves versus who doesn't. But because I thought one of the interesting parts of the Shan-Ricard situation, how Shan thought that Ricard could beat her at the final, is like from the edit that we have seen, Shan has been getting basically all of the credit for the moves that she and Ricard have done together. Like, they've said that they're a partnership and they need both of them, but then Ricard is the one who is seen like kind of in the background where Shan is in the foreground, like making moves. And I guess you can kind of see that in like their confessional counts and like who gets the screen time too. So
that's true. Editing, so tricky. They can literally make any narrative that they want for us as the viewers to see with like whatever kind of storylines that they want to create. I also thought it was funny on this pizza reward how Shan is humming her theme song and then Heather is like, Shan, what are you singing over there? And then it's just so funny to watch the episode twice after knowing that Shan gets voted out here, knowing the outcome, that it's so full circle for Shan's evil villain anthem from episode 1, getting the little ditty with the do-do-do and her humming it, to now she's humming it and then she gets voted out later this episode. I was like, dang, that is so masterful. Like, it was so amazing.
I was wondering if that was going to foreshadow her whole thing with voting out Ricard, but that's not what ended up happening, which this whole Ricard situation was so interesting to me because while Shan and Ricard are like doing this, everyone else back at camp is like, let's get out Ricard. And I thought it was interesting because the rest of the Black Alliance was very aware of the fact they needed to keep Shan in the dark about voting out Ricard. And I just thought that was so interesting because sometimes when we see moves like this, they're like, oh no, we need to tell Shan, otherwise she'll be upset with us later. And it's like, she's going to be upset either way. So I thought it was good for them that they were planning to keep Shan in the dark about wanting to vote out Ricard.
which then Loki gets blown up, which causes all of the chaos this episode. But I agree. I think this was a good episode for Danny because we saw Danny and DeShawn go off while the other people were enjoying their pizza reward. Danny says in a confessional, Ricard has become a big threat to win this game. We don't want to wait too long to make a move. When he's talking to DeShawn, DeShawn says, oh, is now the right time? Danny says, we don't want to wait too long. And I'm like, good for you, Danny. Like, we haven't really seen too much of him. I was low-key nervous because, he's getting a spike in screen time this episode more than usual. Should we be nervous for him? Is he going to get blindsided this episode with like an idol or something? But Danny, for sort of being a background character, sort of like a sidekick in the DeShawn and Danny partnership, Danny has a good head on his shoulders. He is thinking through this strategy, and I agree, like, you don't want to wait too long to make a move. So I like that we saw that from Danny this episode.
Yeah, I do worry that next episode will be when it's his time to go, though. Just because I also thought it was interesting because as far as people who can beat you, who you don't want to wait too long to vote out, I feel like Shan would also be on that list. Shan, I feel like, would definitively win against anyone else in her alliance. So I just thought it was interesting that he was talking about it in regards to Ricard, but not in regards to Shan. So
that's true. So Danny and DeShawn then, they bring up this idea of voting Ricard, keeping Shan in the dark to Liana, which maybe not the right decision there, but DeShawn says that Shan will have nowhere else to go, so we can blindside her. Like, she will be mad at us, but he says no offense, but where else can Shan go? And that does make sense. You're taking out the person that you like, Shan, their right-hand person, Ricard, so that first person, Shan, becomes closer to you. And so that makes a lot of sense. We've seen it time and time again where you have a duo and you take out the partner in the duo in order to make the first person that you want in your alliance closer to you. So DeShawn saying Shan has nowhere else to go, it does make sense. Like we were saying last week, after voting Nasir out, we were worried, who does Shan really have in her corner? Can she win in a 8-person tribe right now? And the answer is no. Like we were speculating last week, we thought Danny and DeShawn would get the numbers because Heather, Erica would go with them. Shan would only really have Liana and Ricard on her team, and that is not a majority in an 8-person tribe.
And Ricard didn't even end up going her way this vote, so...
And neither did Liana, yeah. Or what Liana did, but Liana, we saw her struggling because she's so close with Shan, with that island trip that they went on. They really bonded, not on a game level, but also on a personal, outside the game level. And Liana says that she doesn't want others to be dictating her game, and she wants to differentiate herself from Shan because she wants to show that, hey, I'm not Shan's puppet. Shan isn't the ringleader. Which is really, really interesting that Liana is aware of that, because I feel like that's sort of the sense that we're getting from the edit. Like, Shan is the puppeteer and Liana is the puppet in that relationship. So it's interesting to see Liana recognize, be aware, and be conscientious of that perception that she's just Shan's minion. And it sort of comes up if you saw the secret scene between Liana and Xander and the idol hunting, it sort of comes up there as well. So I just thought it was really fascinating that Liana is aware of her perception.
It's interesting because Liana is aware of her perception, but like also she, I feel like, isn't as aware as she could be, because she ends up being the one to tell Shan about like voting for Ricard, and she's like, I just love you so much. I don't care if this ruins my game because I want you to know. So like there's this kind of duality there where like she's aware of her perception and is aware of what she needs to do, but also sometimes will be aware that she needs to do something for her game and not do it anyways because of the personal relationships that she has.
Yeah, it's a hard thing because like on one hand, they bonded so much. It's an outside of the game relationship that they're bonding over. And so Liana wants to be honest with Shan. Liana tells Shan about the plan to blindside Ricard. And they say, let's vote DeShawn out. We don't want him here anymore. And then Shan goes and tells Ricard all of this information. So honestly, I feel like the turning point this episode that got Shan voted out was this. Liana telling Shan and Shan telling Ricard. If Liana never told Shan, Shan would have never told Ricard. And because of this information, Ricard is so motivated to win individual immunity. And then with the immunity, he's like, hey, I'm actually at the bottom of this alliance. Let's vote out Shan. And it could have been, the quote, easy vote of let's vote Erica. That could be a consensus. But because of Liana telling Shan, Shan telling Ricard, it blew up that whole thing.
Exactly. And I do wonder if Ricard would have won immunity anyway if he didn't know that was the plan. But I guess we can ask what if all day long. But I agree with you. This was kind of like the domino that ended up getting Shan out.
Yeah, and maybe you could say, okay, you don't fault Liana for having that personal relationship, telling Shan. Should Shan not have told Ricard that plan and just kept the information to herself? Because, if you think you're in a 5-person alliance with Shan, Liana, Danny, DeShawn, and Ricard, and one person tells you, Ricard, hey, these other 2 people in the alliance want to vote you out, that is going to freak that person out. And they might realize, like Ricard realizes, hey, I don't have the power in this group. Let me make something else happen. Versus maybe Ricard didn't think of himself as the 5th member of that group, but because of him and Shan's relationship, he thought he was more at the top of that alliance. So maybe he would have just stayed with it. I guess it'll be interesting in the exit interviews with Thanksgiving. There hasn't been any of that exit press from Shan. So I do wonder, will she get questions about that? If, that was maybe a bad decision, or if there was something else catalyzing Ricard to flip this week.
Yeah, and I think depending on who gets to the final 3, I feel like this might end up being a move that is talked about when it gets to final 3, because I think the jury was very aware of the way that Shan was the one running the game up until this point. So I feel like this will definitely be a vote that people will talk about on their resumes.
Definitely a pivotal move. So we go to the immunity challenge. It's a balancing ball challenge, which we actually did a DIY for on our channel. So look at us go. Yeah, go us. Watch that video. We did this challenge and we stood on one foot to replicate the balance beam aspect of balancing the ball on the pole. So maybe we'll have to try that challenge again. I feel like from us being fully nourished and standing on one foot, it wasn't too hard. But I can see when you're malnourished, sleep deprived, and you're on a balance beam on one foot, it can be a lot harder to balance that ball.
Plus, we were also inside when we did this, and, we didn't have any crazy wind. So maybe next time
let's go outside. Yeah. So Ricard wins. This is his 2nd individual immunity win, and he won both challenges this episode. He won the reward challenge and he won the immunity challenge this episode. I feel like that's so dangerous, though. It was do or die for this immunity. He had to win or else he was going to be targeted, so good for him. But Ricard is showing that he's good at challenges, and he's good at different kinds of challenges. We saw he can do an obstacle course puzzle challenge in the reward challenge. Here he can do a balance, endurance, focus challenge. In the foot block challenge, we can see he's good with his feet. So he's definitely a triple threat with challenges.
Yeah, and it's really interesting too, because I feel like I would not have looked at Ricard and been like, oh yeah, challenge beast. So I feel like people need to maybe revise their opinion of what makes a challenge beast.
Like Danny preseason saying, let's revise what makes a threat. Not the big macho dudes like me, but it's the small nerdy people that are good at puzzles. So Ricard's.
Yeah, but yeah, Ricard wins. I love that for him. But I think it's always the best to me whenever someone is like the plan and then they win the immunity, just because then you get so much more interesting strategy as people have to figure out like what to do now that their plan is no longer a plan.
Do you feel like that's Do you feel like the Survivor episode formatting is becoming super predictable? Because, like you were saying, in a lot of these episodes that we've seen, the person that's the target wins individual immunity. Like we saw last week, Erica was the target until they went to that two tribal split, and then Erica won, and then they had to flip who they wanted to vote out. Like, it seems like it's becoming predictable with the editing. Like, target pre challenge, they win. Target changes after challenge.
I do think part of that is, though, you can craft a story better around that, just because, like, if we hadn't had like a target pre-challenge who won, I feel like it would have ended up being kind of boring, you know. So I feel like the episodes where we don't see see like flips and who's going to be the vote end up being the more like less fun to watch episodes. And I think also they only really use this when like it is someone was legitimately the target and then like won the immunity. I feel like if that didn't happen, it wouldn't be edited that way. So
yeah, they don't just create a fake target storyline because the person wins. I agree. It's probably for like the storyline aspects of the TV show where if you have a target pre-challenge, you have someone to root for in the challenge, which is like the underdog. Oh, we want Erica to win. We want Ricard to win because they're going to get voted out if they don't win. So it makes the challenge more interesting and gives you someone to root for. So I can see that. But Ricard wins this second immunity of his. We go back to camp. Ricard has a plan. He has a confessional, realizing that Shan has 4 people in Danny, DeShawn, Liana, and herself. He can't compete with that. And he says, tonight is the time to vote her out.
Yeah, and I guess it was interesting because they had just had this conversation about how Shan doesn't want to vote Ricard out yet. And I kind of wondered, like, what else was his impetus to decide to get her out, because she's always had those same 4 people. And I guess part of it could be that, like, this is the last time where he theoretically could get her out, because Xander, Heather, Erica all on his side would make it 4-on-4. So, yeah.
It's interesting. So we see Ricard tell Xander and Heather the plan to get that, oh, the plan isn't to vote you, Xander. You don't need to play your idol. We're not going to flush your idol. But let's have an alternative plan where us 4, Ricard, Xander, Heather, Erica, we will vote Shan out. And then we see Ricard, hey, we need a 5th person. And he goes to DeShawn and tells DeShawn, hey, Shan told me that you all were wanting to vote me out at the pizza challenge. And then we see DeShawn is like lying up his butt. Oh no, I never said that, but LOL, JK in confessional, I did say that. So I feel like that's also a turning point for getting Shan voted out, was that whole Liana telling Shan, Shan telling Ricard, because now Ricard has ammunition to use against Shan and to get her own alliance members to flip against her.
I feel like the other turning point was when Erica and Heather had that conversation with Danny, because that was when they were able to split the vote rather than just have it be straight Shan, so that if Shan did play her idol, she would go home. She wouldn't go home. So that was the moment in this episode where I was like, oh, Erica is a real threat.
I 100% agree. I wrote in my notes, everyone keeps on saying how smart Erica is, how sneaky she is, how good at the game she is. But like you were saying earlier in the podcast, we haven't really seen that as a viewer. But Erica trying to split these votes and getting it to happen too. I feel like Erica gets the credit for it, even though Danny and DeShawn probably talked about it and decided for themselves or convinced one another that this was the right move to make. From the editing standpoint, it does sort of give Erica the credit as the person to flip Danny to make it a 6, to make a 3-3 split vote possible. And like, dang, Erica is thinking she didn't want to be the backup vote and accidentally get voted out if Shan played an idol. So like, kudos for Erica. Erica gets a lot of points this episode after Ricard for creating this plan. But also we can talk about if this was a good move for Ricard or not. But I was a little bit nervous when we saw Erica talking with Danny because I thought it may have backfired, trying to get Danny to be the 6th versus trying to get Xander to play the extra vote to make it a 3-3 rather than trying to bring in more people. But like we've seen in previous exit interviews with Evie and Tiffany, they were saying Xander's not playing his stuff for other people. So maybe they tried to get Xander's extra vote and he said no. So that's why they went to Danny as the 6th.
Yeah, I guess like you said, Xander isn't playing it for anyone else. And then also, does Xander have a real vested interest in getting Shan specifically out? Because like, yeah, he wants someone who isn't him to go home. But I feel like an extra vote is for when you need a specific person to go out or when you need a tribal council to go a specific way. And right now, Xander is like kind of so much on the bottom that people don't even really care about him. So it's like, as long as it's not him, I feel like he's happy. He's not really trying to take the power position anymore, it doesn't seem. So I feel like he would use the extra vote if he needed Shan specifically to get out, but he doesn't.
Which I feel like that's maybe not good for his end game prospects because it's sort of like, what agency does Xander have if he's not the person driving the ship, the boat, the car, whatever metaphor there that you want, but he's sort of going along with the ride. Someone else dictates the vote. Xander is brought into it. Xander is maybe being targeted because of the idol, but he has lasted another tribal council with an idol. But like you were saying, people might not be thinking of him as a threat to win the game right now, even though he still has an idol in his pocket. If he can get to Final 5, he is guaranteed Final 4 because of that idol. But I do think, like, I don't know, does Xander have agency to win the game? Not sure right now because he's not the person making the moves or driving the boat. Erica on the bottom, but she drove the boat this episode. Ricard on the bottom of that alliance, but he's driving the boat. Xander on the bottom, not really driving any ships.
It seems like from what they have said in exit interviews, like Xander was never really driving. It sounded like when he was making moves with the rest of Yase, it was Evie or Tiffany driving, and he kind of just came along. So I feel like that might be one reason why Xander isn't being seen as a threat, because he doesn't make moves by himself. He just kind of tags along.
Yeah. So we go to tribal council. It was a 3-3 split. This was such a fun tribal council to watch the reactions of the jury members and also the blindside reactions. Xander, his face, he was just so shocked when the first vote was read before the revote. And I just thought that was so funny because he was in on the plan, but he was acting like he wasn't in on the plan, having a shocked face. I was like, he's just acting like he's doesn't know what's happening to push up that like surfer bro vibe. It was just so odd but funny.
I feel like odd but funny is kind of like a very good summary of Xander.
Yeah, and then on the revote, Shan gets that uplifting, emotional music. She knew that her time was up. She knew that the votes were coming her way and people flipped on her. And I was happy that she got that uplifting, emotional music on the revote when everyone was realizing, oh crap, like it is going to be Shan here. But it was sort of sad to see her go.
It was sad to see her go just because, like, she's been such a big character this season.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like even people who don't like her really enjoyed seeing her on screen because she made things happen, you know? So, yeah.
Yeah, Shan is out with an idol in her pocket. Naseer and Shan out in back-to-back weeks with idols in their pocket is wild. Shan, like Naseer last week, went out smiling, took it like a champ, said, hey, Ricard, I'm giving you $1 million. Hey, DeShawn, you suck. You're a snake, as her final words out the door.
I've seen so many people arguing whether she said that to Ricard because she wanted to paint a target on his back or not. And I find that like such an interesting argument, how people are like, oh, she totally wants Ricard to go home next because she told him she would vote. Like, that's so... It doesn't make sense to me that Shan would intentionally paint a target on Ricard's back especially because they said from the beginning that they were gonna like vote each other out. And I feel like anyone with a brain could guess that of the people left, Shan would vote for Ricard or
Yeah.
Liana. So I
I
guess
I think it's sort of like a slip of the tongue thing, like, "Hey, I'm literally going to vote for you. I really like you, Ricard," not realizing that other people might see it negatively and paint a target on his back. I don't think there's anything malicious behind her saying, "Hey, Ricard, I like you. Like, I'll vote for you." Like you were saying, they're an obvious duo. If Shan didn't vote for Ricard, it's because she was bitter or something happened in their relationship, which doesn't seem to be the case. I think Rob Sesternino said that he was going to be asking Shan in the exit interview on Monday whether she did it maliciously or not. So we'll have an answer soon for all those people fighting on Reddit over this.
yeah. But it's really interesting because I feel like it could also end up being what ruins DeShawn's game, just because I guess Danny and Liana wouldn't have much of a leg to stand on if they were like, "Oh, DeShawn, you were the one who broke up the Black Alliance." But if they wanted to get him out and wanted an excuse to do it, they could. So
And it was interesting that she only called DeShawn out for being a snake and not Danny, even though with 6 votes, and she probably thinks Liana voted her way, that multiple people in her alliance would have had to have flipped on her, including Ricard. So it's interesting that she only picked DeShawn to snake, "Hey, you're a snake at," versus, "Hey, Ricard, even though you flipped because we talked about it, I still like you." I do wonder if this was a potentially bad move for Danny and DeShawn, because if their Black Alliance stuck together, they could have had a 4-3 majority going into Final 7 next week. They could have easily made it to Final 4 by just sticking together as a foursome, where Shan probably would have won that foursome. Good odds for her there. But at Final 4, I would say with a Final 4 of Shan, Liana, Danny, DeShawn, it's pretty even in terms of like challenges. It's 2 versus 2. It's not like 3 versus 1 or anything. If one of the men wins that Final 4 immunity, you would send the 2 women to fire. And then if Liana or Shan won that Final 4 immunity, you send Danny and DeShawn to fire. It seems like a pretty good Final 4 if you're Danny DeShawn here. Like, I think for them, maybe they shouldn't have flipped because they're making it harder to get to the end for themselves. The path is so much more difficult now that they voted Shan out. Liana's going to be so pissed off at them. I don't see Liana working with Danny and DeShawn anymore. So it's like they could be target number 1 going into next week.
but I guess you also have to ask the same question about Liana that you could ask of Shan, which is who's she gonna work with? Like, she and Xander have that whole antagonism. Ricard, I feel like, isn't going to necessarily throw in with her, especially because Liana's probably also pissed at Ricard. Like, Liana's pissed at everyone, I feel like. So
I could totally see next week we go into Danny DeShawn as a duo, Heather and Erica as a duo, those 4 not splitting up against their pair there. Ricard, Xander, Liana are sort of free agents now, where I could see the majority being Ricard, Erica, Heather, and Liana teaming up. Liana, like you said, beef with Xander. She's going to be pissed at Danny and DeShawn for not including her in the plan. Maybe if Liana was included in the plan to vote Shan out, she would still work with them. But it seems like Liana was blindsided by this Shan vote. So she'd be pissed and maybe probably won't work with Danny and DeShawn anymore. So I could see DeShawn, Danny, and Xander being a 3 versus Ricard, Erica, Heather, and Liana being a 4, where Liana might just want to avenge Shan and vote DeShawn out next week because of the snake comment.
yeah, so I don't know. That could be like Shan's way of like nudging Liana who to target next and who to align with next. So it'll be interesting to see what happens next week, just because I feel like with that kind of betrayal of the Black Alliance, like the game is very free and wobbly. Like I feel like the only 2 people who are definitely going to stay together are Erica and Heather, and that's about it.
Yeah, I also do wonder if this was too early for Ricard to flip on Shan. We speculated pre-merge, hey, Ricard and Shan have to flip on one another. They shouldn't go to the end together. But who is the biggest target now that Shan was voted out? Shan was a shield for Ricard, even though people were targeting Ricard. Shan was going to try to prevent Ricard from being the person getting the votes and trying to flip it onto Erica or someone else. Like, I feel like maybe Ricard should have switched, not voting Shan out, but keep Shan in and then vote out one of Shan's people, like vote out Danny or DeShawn here. So if Ricard is afraid of being at the bottom of that alliance, you weaken Shan by voting out one of these other people, but you keep Shan in the game as a shield, playing the idol for maybe one of you if she is willing to play it on Ricard or on herself. But I do worry that if you strike too soon, it's going to be like a Kelly Wentworth War Dog situation where War Dog made a move against his ally Kelly. Kelly went home, War Dog went home the week after. Don't necessarily see Ricard going home next week, but I feel like his path to the end, you have to bring in Heather and Erica and create some kind of real trust alliance there and go to the end with them potentially, because it's like, for Ricard, Danny DeShawn already want to vote you out. Like, you have so many people in the game.
The thing is, that's why Ricard didn't really lose anything by voting out Shan. Like, Shan's alliance was always going to be more loyal to Shan than they were to Ricard, right? And then also voting out someone that Shan had as a number was just going to make Shan mad at him anyways. Like, they were all going to flip on him anyways. Because it's like, say Ricard does vote out Danny or does vote out DeShawn. Like, it's not like Shan, Liana, and whoever's left is going to be like, oh yeah, that was totally cool. Like, they're still going to be mad at him. And so I guess for Ricard, it's easier to cut the head off the snake than to like cut the tail off and then have a really pissed off snake. Especially because in voting out Shan, he kind of like create that split between them where Liana still wanted to stay loyal to Shan, whereas Danny and DeShawn didn't. And so in voting out Shan, he effectively got rid of one of her alliance members and then split her alliance into two. And then one half of her alliance already wanted him out, so there's no lost love there. So it's like, I feel like this wasn't too early for Ricard, just because I feel like if he had waited any longer, we would end up being like, oh, Ricard waited too long, because we say that a lot, I feel like, when we get to alliances like this, where it ends up they don't end up doing what they know they need to do. So
it's sort of a damned if you do, damned if you don't. Like, when is the right time to make this kind of move? Because we saw in the episode, Shan and Liana, when Liana was spilling the beans to Shan about the whole pizza situation, Shan and Liana agreed, let's vote out DeShawn. He betrayed us already. So I would think if Ricard had the idea of, okay, I want immunity, let's vote out DeShawn and not Erica. Erica will be willing to work with us, or whatever the reasoning is. Shan and Liana might be on board to vote DeShawn out there and not be pissed off, because they were already thinking like, DeShawn betrayed us, let's vote him out, versus, oh, let's keep everyone in the dark and let's make this move against Shan or DeShawn or any of them. So I do think like he could have maybe used Shan for one more vote and kept her in the game, and then instead voted out DeShawn, who was, or Danny, though both of them are coming for Ricard because they don't want Ricard in the game because they see him as a threat. So now instead of like a Shan versus DeShawn situation, we're having a Ricard versus DeShawn situation, which I think Ricard can come out on top, because we've seen Ricard, Erica, and Heather talking a lot. Liana isn't going to go with Danny and DeShawn, but we've also seen Danny and DeShawn talking with Erica and Heather. They were on the Luvu tribe from the start. So Ricard, if he's not in the numbers next week, could be this target again from Danny and DeShawn if Erica and Heather go with them, because of their whole Blue Strong, or like even though they've had their frictions and whatever, Erica and Heather have some kind of relationship with Danny and DeShawn, because they were able to flip Danny at least to vote with them to vote Shan out. So I don't know. It's so tricky, which it makes it so interesting, because there is no big alliance going into next week, but the game is literally split wide open, which is the good thing of Ricard's move. It splits the game. But for Ricard, Danny, and DeShawn, I'm not sure if it was the best move right now, because those three are going to be major targets moving forward.
Yeah, I guess the game is basically going to be which one of them can convince the others that they're not the biggest target. And I guess it's also worth noting that Ricard could very easily win another individual immunity. And in that case, it would help give him room to maneuver. Because I feel like one of the important things about being immune is that it can let you make these ballsier moves because you know that there's no chance for it to backfire on you that day. So I guess we will have to see.
Yeah, it's so exciting. It's so interesting. It will be interesting to see now. It's sort of DeShawn versus Ricard who can get the threat off of themselves first off, because I do see going into next week, it's going to be like two factions of people after this vote where people might be wanting to target DeShawn to avenge Shan, or they think DeShawn is a good player. They want to vote him out. He's going to win this game. And then on the other hand, like people would be wanting to vote Ricard. Hey, Ricard just blindsided brutally his main person. And if he can do that to them, what can he do to us? He has this amazing resume point. He's winning challenges. That's a huge threat. He could go on an immunity run. Xander also has an idol going into next week. So it's sort of like, will the two factions come together to vote out Xander with the idol, or to split the votes so Xander has to flush his idol? Or will the two factions still be fighting against each other and leave Xander with an idol to go to Final Six, which that seems like the more likely option from what we've seen.
It would be interesting to see them team up and be like, hey, let's put a truce out so that we can make sure that no one goes into Final Six with an immunity idol. So that would be fun. Especially with the trend. Like, it would be really funny if all three people who had idols went out back to back to back with idols in their pocket. So
yeah, Ponderosa is popping. All the people at Ponderosa seem so fun. So I can't wait till that Ponderosa for Shan gets uploaded.
Me either. I'm real excited for that.
Yeah, I'm excited for next week. It's going to be so wild, so messy, so exciting. I'm so interested to see how this plays out because the game is split wide open. It is anyone's game to win or lose right now, which then we can see, hindsight, was this a good or a bad move for certain people?
Yes. So let us know in the comments down below what you think about this move. Was it a good move for Ricard? Was it a good move for DeShawn? Who do you think is going to end up winning in the Battle of the Titans? What is your favorite Shan memory that you have in the tale of her being voted out? Let us know all that and more in the comments down below, and we will see you guys next week. Bye!